The thunder of hooves echoed across the dusty plains as Rosalie Shaw raced toward the horizon, her heart pounding as fiercely as her mare's galloping stride. Freedom tasted like the dust on her lips and the wind in her hair as she fled the suffocating life that awaited her back in Silver Creek. She had no destination in mind, only the desperate need to escape, unaware that her impulsive flight would soon entangle her in a dangerous game between an outlaw with nothing to lose and a cowboy with everything to prove. Texas, 1878. The unforgiving summer sun beat down on the parched landscape as Rosalie slowed her exhausted horse to a walk. She had been riding for hours, putting as much distance as possible between herself and the arranged marriage her father had orchestrated with the town's wealthiest merchant, a man 30 years her senior with wandering hands and cold eyes. At 22, Rosalie had grown up hearing stories of women who charted their own course, who refused to be bartered like cattle. Now she had joined their ranks, though her hasty departure left her with few provisions and even fewer options. She patted her mare's sweaty neck, guilt gnawing at her for pushing the animal so hard. "Just a little farther, Penny," she murmured, scanning the horizon for any sign of shelter. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in vivid oranges and reds, a beautiful but ominous reminder that night would soon fall. In the distance, she spotted what appeared to be a small homestead, a modest cabin with smoke curling from its chimney. Relief washed over her as she guided Penny toward the structure. Perhaps whoever lived there would offer water for her horse and point her toward the nearest town where she could find work. Her savings wouldn't last long, but her skill with a needle might earn her enough to survive until she figured out her next move. As she approached the cabin, a sense of unease crept up her spine. The property looked neglected, with broken fence posts and overgrown weeds surrounding the weathered building. No welcoming lamp shone in the window despite the gathering dusk. When she was within 50 yards, the cabin door swung open. A man emerged, rifle in hand, his stance predatory as he tracked her approach. Even from this distance, she could see the hard lines of his face and the dangerous glint in his eyes. "That's far enough," he called out, his voice rough as gravel. "State your business." Rosalie reined in her horse, swallowing hard against her dry throat. "I'm just passing through. My horse needs water, and I was hoping for directions to the nearest town." The man studied her for a long moment, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Finally, he lowered his rifle slightly. "Nearest town's Redemption, about 20 miles west." He gestured toward a water trough near the side of the cabin. "Water your horse if you must, then be on your way." "Thank you." Rosalie dismounted carefully, her legs stiff from the long ride. She led Penny to the trough, keeping a wary eye on the stranger. As the horse drank greedily, she took the opportunity to assess her surroundings. Several horses were tethered behind the cabin, and she could hear men's voices from inside. The man continued watching her, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Pretty girl like you shouldn't be traveling alone. Dangerous country." Before Rosalie could respond, the cabin door opened again, and 3 more men spilled out, their laughter dying as they spotted her. Their appearance, unshaven faces, dirty clothes, and holstered guns sent alarm bells ringing in her head. These weren't ranch hands or farmers, but men who lived outside the law. "Well, look what we have here," one of them said, a tall man with a jagged scar across his cheek. "Jasper, you've been holding out on us." The first man, Jasper, shook his head. "Just rode up asking for water and directions. Is that all she's asking for?" Another man jeered, eliciting cruel laughter from his companions. Rosalie's heart hammered in her chest as she quickly gathered Penny's reins. "I should be going, thank you for the water." "No need to rush off," Jasper said, moving to block her path. "Night's falling, dangerous time to be riding alone. Why don't you stay here? We'll keep you safe." His smile never reached his eyes. "I appreciate the offer, but I really must be on my way." She tried to keep her voice steady as she moved to mount her horse. Jasper's hand shot out, gripping her arm with bruising force. "I insist." Rosalie tried to pull away, panic rising in her throat. "Please let go of me. The lady asked you to let her go." The new voice cut through the tension like a knife. Every head turned toward the source. A tall man sat atop a muscular black stallion at the edge of the clearing, his face partially shadowed by the brim of his hat. Even in the fading light, Rosalie could see the determination in his square jaw and the steady hands that held the reins. Jasper's grip tightened on Rosalie's arm. "This ain't your business, cowboy. Ride on." The newcomer dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He stepped forward, and the last rays of sunlight illuminated his features' strong cheekbones, clear green eyes, and a mouth set in a grim line. He couldn't have been more than 28, but his eyes held the weathered look of a man who had seen more than his fair share of hardship. "I'm making it my business," he replied, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. His right hand hovered near the revolver holstered at his hip. "There's 4 of us and 1 of you," the scarred man pointed out, spreading his arms wide. "Bad odds." The cowboy didn't flinch. "I've faced worse." Jasper sneered and reached for Rosalie's arm again. "The lady's staying with us tonight." In one swift motion, the cowboy drew his revolver, the metal gleaming in the last light of day. The outlaw reached for her arm. The cowboy said, "Touch her and meet God early." The words hung in the air, charged with deadly promise. No one moved for several heartbeats. Then Jasper slowly raised his hands, a calculating look in his eyes. "No need for bloodshed. We were just offering the lady some hospitality. Your kind of hospitality isn't wanted." The cowboy's gaze flickered to Rosalie. "Madam, if you'd care to mount up, I'd be happy to escort you to redemption." Relief flooded through her, but caution kept her rooted to the spot. She didn't know this man any better than the outlaws. "How do I know I can trust you?" A brief smile touched his lips. "You don't. But I give you my word as Grant Prescott that I'll see you safely to town and nothing more." Something in his steady gaze convinced her. With a quick nod, she mounted Penny, keeping a watchful eye on Jasper and his men. Grant backed toward his horse, gun still trained on the outlaws. With practiced ease, he swung into the saddle one-handed, never letting his aim waver. "We'll be going now. Any man who follows meets the same fate I promised a moment ago." With that, he nudged his stallion into motion, gesturing for Rosalie to ride beside him. They maintained a steady pace until the cabin disappeared behind them. Then Grant urged their mounts into a gallop, putting distance between them and potential pursuit. After riding hard for nearly an hour, Grant finally slowed their pace. The moon had risen, casting a silver glow over the landscape. "I think we're safe for now," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "But we should keep moving. Those men aren't likely to forget the slight." Rosalie nodded, studying her rescuer in the moonlight. His profile was strong, and despite his hard exterior, there was a gentleness in the way he handled his horse. "Thank you," she said finally. "I fear I would have fared poorly had you not arrived when you did." Grant's expression darkened. "Jasper Holt and his gang have been terrorizing this territory for months. Robbery, rustling, worse. The law hasn't been able to catch them yet." He looked at her curiously. "What's a lady like you doing out here alone? These parts aren't safe for unaccompanied women." Rosalie hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I'm traveling to visit my aunt in Redemption," she lied, unwilling to share her true circumstances with a stranger, no matter how helpful he'd been. Grant's raised eyebrow suggested he didn't believe her, but he didn't press the issue. "Well, I'm headed there myself. We can ride together safety in numbers." As they continued through the night, Rosalie found herself studying her companion. Despite his rough appearance, there was something undeniably noble about Grant Prescott. His clothes were worn but clean, his gun well maintained. He rode with the confidence of a man who knew the land and his own capabilities. "Are you from Redemption, Mr. Prescott?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "Grant, please." "And no, I'm from nowhere in particular these days. I was raised on a ranch near Austin, but I've been drifting for the past few years." A shadow passed over his face. And you, Miss Shaw, Rosalie Shaw. She saw no harm in giving her real name, as she doubted anyone would be searching for her this far from Silver Creek. I'm from Silver Creek originally. That's a fair distance. Your aunt must be special for you to make such a journey. Rosalie flushed, uncomfortable with perpetuating the lie. Yes, she is. Grant didn't respond immediately, his eyes scanning the horizon. We should make camp soon. The horses need rest, and so do you. I know a spot not far from here, a small creek with good cover. True to his word, Grant led them to a secluded spot where a creek cut through a stand of cottonwood trees. He dismounted and helped Rosalie down, his touch brief but strong. The simple contact sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. While Grant tended to the horses, Rosalie gathered wood for a small fire. Years of helping around her father's ranch had taught her practicality, if nothing else. By the time Grant returned, she had a modest fire crackling. Impressive, he remarked, setting down his saddlebags. Most women I escort don't know the first thing about making camp. I'm not most women, Rosalie replied with a small smile. And do you often escort women through dangerous territory, Mr. Prescott? Grant chuckled, the sound warming her more than the fire. Not if I can help it. Too much trouble. He pulled some jerky and hardtack from his provisions and offered her a share. It's not much, but it'll keep you going. They ate in companionable silence, the crackling fire and nighttime sounds of the wilderness the only music to their meal. Rosalie found herself relaxing for the first time since she'd fled her home. So, Grant said finally, his green eyes reflecting the firelight, are you going to tell me the real reason you're out here alone, or should we stick with the ant story? Rosalie stiffened. I don't know what you mean. You're running from something or someone. I recognize the look. His tone wasn't accusatory, merely matter of fact. You don't have to tell me. Your business is your own, but if there's trouble following you, I should know about it. She studied him for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she sighed. I left home to avoid an unwanted marriage. My father arranged it without my consent. The man is not kind. Grant nodded slowly. I see, and is this man likely to come after you? I don't know. Perhaps. He's wealthy and accustomed to getting what he wants. But Silver Creek is many days' ride from here. I don't think they would look for me in this direction. Well, your secret's safe with me. He poked at the fire with a stick. Get some rest. I'll take first watch. Rosalie wanted to protest that he needed sleep too, but exhaustion was already pulling at her limbs. She arranged her saddle as a pillow and wrapped herself in the thin blanket Grant offered from his pack. Grant, she said softly as sleep began to claim her, thank you. Not just for the rescue, but for not asking too many questions. He tipped his hat slightly, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. Sleep well, Miss Shaw. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Rosalie awoke to find Grant already up, brewing coffee over a small fire. The domestic scene struck her as oddly comforting, this dangerous man with his gentle movements as he prepared their simple breakfast. Morning, he greeted, handing her a tin cup of steaming coffee. Hope you slept well. Better than I expected, she admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. The rich aroma helped clear the last cobwebs of sleep from her mind. How much farther to redemption? We should reach it by midday if we make good time. He studied her over the rim of his own cup. What will you do once we get there? If you don't really have an aunt waiting, I mean. Rosalie sighed, cradling the warm cup in her hands. Fine work, I suppose. I'm a decent seamstress and I can read and write. Perhaps there's a shop that needs help or a school that needs a teacher's assistant. Grant nodded thoughtfully. Redemption's growing fast. Lots of opportunities for those willing to work. He hesitated, then added, I know the owner of the hotel there, Mrs. Henderson, widowed a few years back, runs the place herself. She might be hiring. Rosalie smiled gratefully. I would appreciate an introduction. They broke camp efficiently, working together as if they'd done so many times before. As they rode, Rosalie found herself increasingly curious about her taciturn companion. You said you've been drifting for years. What do you do? Are you a ranch hand? Grant's expression turned guarded. Sometimes. I've done a bit of everything: ranching, hunting, scouting for the army occasionally. Is that what brings you to redemption? Work? Something like that. His tone suggested he didn't wish to elaborate. Rosalie didn't push, respecting his privacy as he had respected hers. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of their horses' hooves creating a soothing backdrop. As the sun climbed higher, the landscape began to change. The open plains gave way to more varied terrain, rolling hills dotted with mesquite and oak. In the distance, Rosalie spotted the telltale signs of civilization: fenced fields and the occasional farmhouse. We're getting close, Grant confirmed, following her gaze. Redemption's just over that ridge. When they crested the hill, Rosalie caught her first glimpse of the town, larger than she'd expected, with a main street flanked by wooden buildings, some quite substantial. A church steeple rose proudly above the rooftops, and she could see people moving about their business, wagons rolling along the dusty streets. "It's bigger than I thought," she remarked, a mixture of relief and apprehension filling her. A larger town meant more opportunities, but also more challenges for a woman alone. It's grown a lot in the last few years. The railroad came through last spring, brought lots of new folks and new money. Grant's expression was neutral, but Rosalie sensed a complexity in his relationship with the town. They rode down the hill toward redemption, the horses picking up their pace as if sensing rest and food ahead. As they approached the outskirts, Rosalie became aware of her appearance: dusty clothes, tangled hair, hardly the picture of respectability she would need to present to potential employers. Grant seemed to read her thoughts. "We'll go straight to the hotel. Mrs. Henderson can help you get settled." He glanced at her with unexpected gentleness. "Don't worry, she's good people." The main street was bustling with midday activity when they rode in. Rosalie felt eyes on them as they passed, curious glances and a few outright stares. A woman arriving with a man who wasn't her husband or father was bound to raise eyebrows, especially in her disheveled state. Grant led them to a handsome 3-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Redemption Hotel. Unlike many of the surrounding structures, it was painted a cheerful yellow with white trim, with flower boxes beneath the windows. They dismounted in front, and Grant tied their horses to the hitching post. "Wait here," he instructed, then hesitated. "Or would you prefer to come in?" "I don't want to seem like I'm making decisions for you." Rosalie appreciated his consideration. "I'll come with you, better to make my own introductions." The hotel lobby was clean and welcoming, with polished wooden floors and comfortable-looking chairs arranged around a stone fireplace. A handsome desk stood at one end, behind which sat a plump woman in her 50s, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked up as they entered, her expression shifting from professional politeness to surprised recognition. "Grant Prescott, as I live and breathe." She bustled out from behind the desk and embraced him warmly. "It's been too long, young man." Grant returned the embrace with genuine affection. "Hello, Mrs. Henderson, you're looking well. Flattery will get you everywhere." She stepped back, holding him at arm's length to examine him critically. "You're too thin. Haven't you been eating?" Before he could answer, her attention shifted to Rosalie, curiosity evident in her kind eyes. "And who's this?" "This is Miss Rosalie Shaw. She's new to town and in need of lodging and perhaps employment." Grant's tone was respectful. "Rosalie, this is Mrs. Helena Henderson, the finest hotel proprietor in 3 counties. Mrs. Henderson beamed at the compliment before turning her assessing gaze on Rosalie. "Any friend of Grant's is welcome here. Are you too?" She left the question hanging delicately. "No," Rosalie said quickly. "Mr. Prescott assisted me when I encountered some trouble on the road. We only met yesterday." Grant nodded in confirmation. "Miss Shaw is a skilled seamstress looking for work. I thought you might know of opportunities in town." "Well, you've come to the right place," Mrs. Henderson said warmly. "Redemption is full of possibilities for a capable young woman." She linked her arm through Rosalie's. First things first, you look exhausted, dear. Let's get you settled in a room. You can clean up, rest, and we'll discuss possibilities over dinner." Rosalie glanced at Grant, suddenly reluctant to part from the man who had become her protector in such a short time. "What about you?" "I have some business in town," he replied, his expression carefully neutral. "But I'll check in later to make sure you're settled if that's all right." "Of course." She extended her hand. "Thank you again, Mr. Prescott. I'm in your debt." Grant took her hand briefly, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "No debt necessary, Miss Shaw. I'm glad I was there." With a tip of his hat to both women, he turned and left the hotel. Mrs. Henderson watched him go with a thoughtful expression before turning back to Rosalie. "Now then, let's get you taken care of. You can tell me your story over tea as much or as little as you'd like." True to her word, the older woman arranged a room, a hot bath, and a change of clothes borrowed from her own daughter who had married and moved to San Antonio the previous year. Refreshed and feeling more human, Rosalie joined Mrs. Henderson in her private parlor behind the hotel lobby. Over tea and sandwiches, Rosalie shared an edited version of her circumstances, enough truth to explain her presence but omitting details that might make it easier for anyone to track her. Mrs. Henderson listened without judgment. "Well, you wouldn't be the first woman to seek a fresh start in redemption. This town has a way of taking in strays," she smiled. "Much like Grant took you under his wing." "You seem to know him well," Rosalie observed, curious about the man who had saved her. "I've known Grant since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. His father, Joseph Prescott, was one of the finest men I ever knew, ran a successful ranch outside of Austin until the war came." A shadow crossed her face. "Joseph didn't come home. His mother tried to keep the ranch going, but it was too much. They lost it when Grant was 15. "That's terrible," Rosalie said softly, thinking of the quiet strength she'd observed in Grant. "Life hasn't been kind to that boy, but he's made his way. Works as a range detective now, tracking down rustlers and such for the big ranches and cattle associations." Mrs. Henderson's expression grew serious. "He's good at it, too good, some say, has a reputation for always getting his man." "A range detective?" Rosalie echoed, surprised. It explained his confidence when confronting Jasper and his gang. It's dangerous work, but it suits him. He's got a strong sense of justice. Mrs. Henderson poured more tea. "Now, about your situation." "As it happens, I could use help here at the hotel. My regular girl left to get married last month, and I haven't found a replacement I trust. Room and board plus wages. What do you say?" Relief washed over Rosalie. "I would be very grateful for the opportunity, Mrs. Henderson." "Wonderful." "You can start tomorrow." She stood, smoothing her skirts. "Now I should get back to the front desk. Rest this evening. Tomorrow we'll begin your training." Left alone, Rosalie moved to the window, gazing out at the bustling town that would be her new home. Her thoughts drifted to Grant Prescott. A range detective. No wonder he had handled Jasper's gang with such confidence. She wondered what business had brought him to redemption and when or if she would see him again. As twilight settled over redemption, Rosalie ventured downstairs to the hotel dining room. Mrs. Henderson had insisted she join the regular dinner service, saying she needed to meet some of the town's residents if she was to make a life here. The dining room was nearly full, with well-dressed townspeople and travelers enjoying the hotel's renowned cooking. Mrs. Henderson greeted her warmly and led her to a small table near the window. "Best view in the house," the older woman said with a wink, "and you'll be able to see everyone who comes and goes." Rosalie had just received her soup when the dining room door opened and Grant Prescott walked in. He'd cleaned up since their arrival, wearing a fresh shirt and his hair still damp from washing. He paused in the doorway, scanning the room until his gaze landed on her. Something in his expression softened and he made his way to her table. "Miss Shaw," he said, removing his hat. "You're looking well. I trust Mrs. Henderson has taken good care of you." "She's been wonderful," Rosalie replied, unable to keep the smile from her face. "Won't you join me?" He hesitated, glancing around the crowded room. I wouldn't want to impose, please, I insist. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. I'd welcome the company. Grant sat, placing his hat on the empty chair beside him. A waiter appeared almost immediately with coffee and took his order. When they were alone again, Grant studied her with those penetrating green eyes. You look more at ease, he observed. The town suits you. I've only been here a few hours, she laughed. But yes, it feels promising. Mrs. Henderson has offered me a position here at the hotel. That's good news. He seemed genuinely pleased. She's an excellent judge of character. She speaks highly of you as well. Rosalie hesitated, then added, she mentioned you're a range detective. Grant's expression turned guarded. Did she now? Is that why you were in the territory where we met? Were you tracking Jasper Holt? He nodded slowly. The Bar T Ranch lost nearly 100 head last month. All signs pointed to Holt's gang. I was following their trail when I came across you. So you put aside your pursuit to help me, Rosalie realized, feeling a fresh wave of gratitude. Grant shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with her thanks. Holt's not going anywhere. His gang has a hideout in these parts. I'll pick up the trail again. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their food. As they ate, Grant gradually relaxed, sharing stories of his adventures across the territory. Rosalie found herself captivated not just by the tales, but by the man himself, his quiet integrity, his subtle humor, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. As the dining room began to empty, their conversation turned more personal. Grant asked about her life before Silver Creek, and Rosalie found herself sharing more than she had intended, stories of her childhood on her father's small ranch, the death of her mother when she was 16. Her dreams of something more than the limited future available to women in her position. You're brave, Grant said finally. Walking away from everything you know, striking out on your own. Most wouldn't have the courage. Or the foolishness, Rosalie countered with a small smile. I nearly ended up in serious trouble within a day of leaving home. But you didn't. His gaze held her steadily. And now you're here, making a new start. That takes strength. The simple praise warmed her more than it should have. As the waiter cleared their plates, Rosalie realized they were the last patrons in the dining room. The evening had slipped away unnoticed in the pleasure of their conversation. I should let you rest, Grant said, noticing her sudden awareness of the late hour. You've had quite an ordeal. Will you be staying in town long? The question slipped out before she could consider its implications. Grant's expression turned serious. Until I finish my business with Holt. Could be days, could be weeks. These things take time. Of course. Rosalie tried to hide her disappointment. Well, I'm grateful our paths crossed, however briefly. Grant stood and retrieved his hat. Perhaps they'll cross again before I leave town. He hesitated, then added, would you allow me to call on you? Properly, I mean. The request sent a flutter through her chest. I would like that very much, he nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. Good night, Rosalie. Good night, Grant. She watched him leave, her mind swirling with confusion. She had fled one man only to find her thoughts consumed by another, though the circumstances could not have been more different. Grant Prescott was nothing like the aging merchant her father had chosen. He was kind, brave, and made her feel seen in a way no man ever had before. But she had come to redemption to build independence, not to fall under another man's influence. With a sigh, she rose and made her way back to her room, determined to focus on the opportunity Mrs. Henderson had provided. The next week passed in a blur of activity as Rosalie learned the routines of the hotel. Mrs. Henderson proved to be an excellent teacher and a fair employer, patient with mistakes but insisting on high standards. The work was varied, greeting guests, managing reservations, overseeing the cleaning staff, and occasionally helping in the kitchen during busy meal times. Rosalie embraced it all, grateful for the structure and purpose after the uncertainty of her flight from home. She quickly became a favorite among the regular guests, her natural warmth and efficiency earning their respect. True to his word, Grant called on her several times that week. Their interactions were proper but increasingly familiar: a shared meal in the dining room, a walk down Main Street on Sunday afternoon, a few precious moments of conversation in the hotel lobby when his investigations brought him there. Rosalie found herself looking forward to these encounters more than she cared to admit. There was something about Grant's presence that both excited and calmed her, the contradiction as intriguing as the man himself. On her 8th day in redemption, Rosalie was working at the front desk when the hotel door burst open and a breathless boy of about 12 rushed in. "Miss Shaw," he called, scanning the lobby until he spotted her. "Miss Shaw, Mr. Prescott sent me. Says you need to come quick to Doc Wilson's office." Fear clutched at her heart. "Is he hurt? What happened?" "Shot," the boy said bluntly. "Ambushed outside of town. He's asking for you." Rosalie turned to Mrs. Henderson, who had emerged from the back office at the commotion. "Go," the older woman said immediately. "I'll handle things here." Without waiting for further permission, Rosalie grabbed her shawl and followed the boy out into the street. They hurried down Main Street toward a small building with a discreet sign identifying it as the office of Dr. Samuel Wilson. Inside, the sharp smell of antiseptic and the metallic scent of blood assaulted her senses. A harried-looking man in a blood-stained apron emerged from a back room. "Are you Rosalie?" he asked brusquely. When she nodded, he jerked his head toward the door behind him. "He's been asking for you." "Got the bullet out, but he lost a lot of blood. Next few hours will tell." Steeling herself, Rosalie entered the small treatment room. Grant lay on a narrow bed, his face ashen against the white pillow. A bandage wrapped around his left shoulder was already showing spots of blood. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. "Grant," she whispered, moving to his side, his eyelids fluttered open, unfocused at first, then clearing as they settled on her face. "Rosalie, you came." "Of course I came." She took his hand, alarmed at its coolness. "What happened?" "Ambush," he murmured. "One of Holt's men recognized me in town, must have reported back." A grimace of pain crossed his face. "Careless of me." "Don't talk," she urged. "Save your strength." He shook his head stubbornly. "Listen, Holt knows I'm tracking him. He'll want to finish the job." His grip on her hand tightened. "You need to be careful. He might come after you too to get to me." "Don't worry about me," Rosalie insisted. "Focus on getting well." The door opened and Dr. Wilson returned with fresh bandages. "He needs rest," he told Rosalie firmly. "You can come back tomorrow." Rosalie reluctantly released Grant's hand. "I'll return in the morning. Please rest and get strong." A ghost of his usual smile touched his lips. "Yes, madam." Outside the doctor's office, Rosalie paused, trying to collect herself. The sight of Grant's wounded body had affected her more deeply than she'd expected. In just over a week, he had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated or prepared for. As she walked back to the hotel, she scanned the streets warily, Grant's warning echoing in her mind. The thought that Jasper Holt might target her sent a chill down her spine. She'd seen the cold calculation in the outlaw's eyes during their brief encounter. Mrs. Henderson was waiting anxiously when she returned. "How is he?" "Alive," Rosalie replied, her voice shakier than she'd intended. "The doctor removed the bullet, but he's very weak." The older woman clasped Rosalie's hands. "Grant's strong, he'll pull through." She hesitated, then added, "But this isn't good. If Holt's gang is targeting him openly, no one associated with him is safe." He said as much. Rosalie sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "What should we do?" "For tonight, nothing. The sheriff will increase patrols after an attack like this." Mrs. Henderson's expression was grim. "Tomorrow we'll reassess. For now you should rest. I'll have Samuel bring dinner to your room." That night, sleep eluded Rosalie. She tossed and turned, haunted by images of Grant pale and bleeding, interspersed with memories of Jasper Holt's predatory gaze. When dawn finally broke, she dressed quickly and hurried to the doctor's office, eager for news. "Doctor." Wilson met her at the door, his tired face breaking into a smile. "He's stronger this morning. Fever broke before dawn. The man has a constitution like an ox." Relief washed over her as she followed the doctor to Grant's bedside. He was sitting up, propped against pillows, his face still pale but his eyes clear and alert. "You look better," she said, taking the chair beside his bed. "Feel better too. Doc says I was lucky bullet missed anything vital." Grant studied her face. "You look tired, didn't sleep." "Not much," she admitted. "I was worried." Something softened in his expression. "I'm sorry to have caused you concern." Dr. Wilson cleared his throat from the doorway. "Miss Shaw, would you mind sitting with him while I get some breakfast? He's supposed to stay put, but he's already tried to get up twice." "I'd be happy to." Once the doctor left, she turned back to Grant with a stern look. "You should be resting." "Can't rest. Not with Holt out there, bold enough to send men after me in broad daylight." Frustration edged his voice. "And now I've put you in danger too." "I was already in danger when you found me," she reminded him gently. "You saved me then. Let me help you now." Grant's expression turned grave. "This isn't your fight, Rosalie. You made it mine when you stood between me and Jasper Holt." She met his gaze steadily. "I won't cower in fear while you face this alone." A complex emotion crossed his face, concern mingled with something warmer. "You're a remarkable woman, Rosalie Shaw." The simple praise brought heat to her cheeks. To cover her confusion, she reached for the water glass on his bedside table. "Here, you should drink. The doctor said you lost a lot of blood." As she helped him with the glass, their fingers brushed. The brief contact sent awareness shimmering through her, and she pulled away quickly, unsettled by her reaction. Grant watched her with those perceptive eyes, seeming to read more in her face than she intended to reveal. Rosalie, whatever he intended to say, was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Morgan, a tall man with a weathered face and iron-gray hair. He nodded to Rosalie before turning his attention to Grant. "Prescott, glad to see you among the living. Got a description of the shooters from witnesses." Two men, matching Holt's usual companions. The sheriff's expression was grim. "They rode out of town heading east, but they'll be back. Holt doesn't leave loose ends, I know." Grant shifted, wincing at the movement. "Any word on their hideout?" "Nothing concrete." "Got men watching the trails, but they know this country too well." Sheriff Morgan glanced at Rosalie. "Miss Shaw, isn't it? Mrs. Henderson's new girl." When she nodded, he continued, "You should be careful, miss. Word is you had a run-in with Holt before coming to town." "Yes," Rosalie confirmed. "Mr. Prescott intervened when Holt and his men threatened me." The sheriff's expression darkened. "That makes you a potential target too. I'd advise staying in town, keeping to public places." "I have no intention of wandering off, Sheriff," Rosalie assured him. After the sheriff departed, an uncomfortable silence fell between them. Grant's expression had turned distant, troubled. "I should let you rest," Rosalie said finally, rising from her chair. Grant caught her hand, surprising her. "Be careful. Holt is more dangerous than you know." His fingers tightened around hers. "I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me." The raw emotion in his voice stirred something deep within her. "Nothing will happen. I'll be careful, I promise." He released her hand reluctantly. "Come back tomorrow if you can spare the time." "I'll come," she promised, wondering when this man's welfare had become so essential to her peace of mind. The next week established a routine. Rosalie worked at the hotel during the day, then spent her evenings at Grant's bedside as he recovered. Dr. Wilson, seeing the positive effect of her visits on his patient, encouraged them, often leaving them alone for long stretches. During these quiet hours, they talked of everything and nothing: their childhoods, their hopes, books they'd read, places they'd seen. Grant told her of his years working as a range detective, the satisfaction of bringing criminals to justice, and the loneliness of a life constantly on the move. In turn, Rosalie shared more of her own story: her father's increasing bitterness after her mother's death, her struggle to maintain her independence, and finally, the arranged marriage that had driven her to flee. "He gave me no choice," she explained, her hands twisting in her lap. "Mr. Blackburn was 54 to my 22, had buried 2 wives already, and looked at me like I was a prize mare at auction. When father announced the engagement, I knew I couldn't stay." Grant's expression darkened. "Your father had no right to sell you like property." He saw it as securing my future, a wealthy husband, a respected position in town. Rosalie sighed. He couldn't understand why I would reject such security. And now, do you regret leaving? Rosalie met his gaze steadily. Not for a moment. Even with the dangers, I feel more alive now than I ever did at home. Something shifted in Grant's expression, a softening, a warmth that made her heart beat faster. You deserve to choose your own path, Rosalie, your own happiness. The intimacy of the moment was broken by Dr. Wilson's return, but the memory of Grant's words and the look in his eyes stayed with Rosalie long into the night. As Grant grew stronger, Dr. Wilson finally agreed he could leave the clinic, though he insisted on another week of rest before resuming his duties. With no permanent residence in Redemption, Grant took a room at the hotel, allowing Rosalie to continue checking on him between her work responsibilities. 10 days after the shooting, Rosalie brought dinner to Grant's room, finding him fully dressed and looking more like himself, though still moving carefully to protect his healing shoulder. "Should you be up?" she asked, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "Doc says short walks are good for me now." Grant smiled at her concern. "I'm not planning to chase outlaws just yet. I should hope not." She arranged the plates, acutely aware of his presence behind her. In the close confines of the hotel room, his physical presence seemed magnified the breadth of his shoulders, the clean scent of soap that clung to him. "Join me," he asked, gesturing to the second chair. They ate together, discussing the day's events at the hotel. Rosalie found herself watching him more than eating, noting the improved color in his face, the steady strength returning to his movements. "You're staring," Grant observed with a hint of amusement. Rosalie flushed. "I'm just glad to see you recovering. Thanks to your care." His expression turned serious. "Rosalie, I need to tell you something. Sheriff Morgan received word yesterday. They think they've located Holt's hideout, an abandoned ranch about 15 miles east of here." Alarm shot through her. "Are you planning to go after them?" "Not alone. The sheriff's organizing a posse. We'll ride out in 3 days." His eyes held her steadily. "I wanted you to hear it from me." "Your shoulder isn't healed," she protested. "Surely someone else could go." "Holt is my responsibility. I've been tracking him for months." His jaw set in a determined line. "And after what he tried to do to you, it's personal now. That's what worries me." Rosalie reached across the table impulsively, taking his hand. "Promise me you'll be careful. Don't take unnecessary risks." Grant looked down at their joined hands, then back to her face. "You know, when I first rode into that clearing and saw Holt threatening you, all I could think was that I couldn't let him hurt you, this woman I'd never even met." He turned his hand to interlace their fingers. "I still feel that way, only stronger. I'll stop Holt because it's my job, but more than that, I'll stop him because he threatened someone I care about." The simple declaration sent warmth flooding through Rosalie. "I care about you too," she whispered. "More than I should, perhaps, after knowing you such a short time." Grant's expression softened, and he leaned forward, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Time doesn't always matter in these things." Their eyes held for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken emotions. Then Grant slowly closed the distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a gentle kiss that still managed to steal the breath from her lungs. When they parted, Rosalie found herself trembling slightly. Grant's eyes were dark with emotion as he studied her face. "I shouldn't have done that," he said softly, "but I couldn't help myself." "I'm glad you did," she replied honestly. "I've been wondering what it would be like." A slow smile spread across his face. "And better than I imagined." She returned his smile, feeling lighter than she had in years. For all the uncertainty surrounding them, Holt's threat, Grant's dangerous profession, her own precarious new life, this moment felt right, like finding solid ground after weeks of shifting sand. The next 2 days passed in a haze of anticipation and dread. Rosalie threw herself into her work at the hotel, trying to distract herself from thoughts of the upcoming raid on Holt's hideout. Grant spent much of his time at the sheriff's office, planning the operation and regaining his strength. They saw each other at meals and during brief moments between Rosalie's duties. Each encounter was charged with a new awareness, small touches and lingering glances replacing some of their previous caution. They didn't speak again of the kiss, or what might lie beyond it, both silently agreeing that such conversations should wait until after the threat of Holt was resolved. On the evening before the posse was set to ride out, Grant invited Rosalie to walk with him. They strolled along Redemption's quiet back streets as the sun set, eventually finding themselves at a small park on the edge of town. "I wanted to see you alone before tomorrow," Grant explained as they sat on a bench overlooking the town. "Just in case." "Don't say that," Rosalie protested. "You'll come back. I plan to." He took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "But this job has taught me not to take anything for granted. If something happens, it won't," she insisted, gripping his hand tightly. Grant smiled at her determination. "Humor me." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small folded paper. "I've written a letter to my mother in Austin. If anything happens to me, would you send it to her? The address is inside." Rosalie accepted the letter reluctantly. "I will, but you'll deliver it yourself when this is over." "I hope so." He studied her face in the fading light. "You know, when I rode into Redemption 2 weeks ago, I never imagined I'd meet someone like you. I've spent so many years alone, moving from job to job, town to town. For the first time, I'm thinking about what it might be like to stay in one place." Hope bloomed in Rosalie's chest. "Redemption could use a man of your skills. The town's growing. Sheriff Morgan mentioned he's looking for a deputy. It's not just about the job." Grant's gaze held hers intently. "It's about having a reason to stay." The implication was clear and Rosalie felt her heart racing. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I care for you, Rosalie, more than I thought possible in such a short time." His expression was earnest, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "I know it's too soon to speak of permanence, but when this business with Holt is finished, I'd like to court you properly if you're willing." Rosalie felt tears spring to her eyes. "I'm more than willing." Grant's face lit with joy and he pulled her close, his kiss more confident than before but still achingly tender. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "That's something worth coming back for," he murmured. They walked back to the hotel hand in hand, the approaching danger temporarily overshadowed by the promise of what might be. At the hotel entrance, Grant kissed her once more before reluctantly saying good night. "The posse leaves at dawn," he said. "Don't come to see us off." "I'd rather remember you like this." Rosalie nodded, fighting back tears. "Be safe, come back to me." "I will," he promised, touching her cheek gently before turning and walking away. Rosalie barely slept that night, tossing and turning as her mind conjured all manner of terrible scenarios. She rose before dawn, unable to remain in bed, and dressed quietly. Despite Grant's request, she couldn't let him leave without seeing him one more time. She slipped down to the hotel lobby, intending to watch from the window as the posse gathered. To her surprise, she found Mrs. Henderson already there, a worried expression on her face. "You couldn't stay away either?" the older woman asked with understanding. Rosalie shook her head. "I had to see him. He cares for you deeply. I've known that boy since he was small, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Mrs. Henderson squeezed her hand. "He'll come back." They watched together as men began to gather in front of the sheriff's office across the street. In the pale pre-dawn light, Rosalie counted 12 riders, including Sheriff Morgan and Grant, whose tall figure was unmistakable even at a distance. As if sensing her presence, Grant turned toward the hotel. Rosalie moved to the door, unable to remain hidden. Their eyes met across the street, and Grant's solemn expression softened. He raised his hand in a small salute, which she returned, fighting back tears. With a final nod, he turned back to the sheriff, who was giving last-minute instructions. Minutes later, the posse rode out, the thunder of hooves gradually fading as they disappeared down the eastern road. "Come," Mrs. Henderson said gently when they had gone. "We have a hotel to run, and keeping busy will make the time pass faster." The day crawled by in agonizing slowness. Rosalie moved through her duties mechanically, her mind constantly returning to Grant and the dangers he faced. By evening, the strain of waiting had left her exhausted, but sleep remained elusive. She was arranging flowers in the lobby the next morning when the hotel door burst open. Sheriff Morgan staggered in, his clothes covered in dust and blood, supported by one of his deputies. "Sheriff," Mrs. Henderson exclaimed, rushing forward. "What happened? Where are the others?" "Ambush," the sheriff gasped as they lowered him into a chair. "Holt was waiting for us, men scattered. Some wounded, don't know how many made it." Rosalie felt the room spin around her. "Grant," she whispered, dreading the answer. Sheriff Morgan's eyes met hers, his expression grim. "Went after Holt, told us to fall back while he pursued, haven't seen him since." "We need to send help," Rosalie insisted, fighting panic. "He could be hurt." "Already done. Second posse is forming now." The sheriff winced as he shifted in his chair. "But Holt had at least 10 men with him, well armed if Prescott caught up to them alone." He didn't need to finish the thought. Rosalie turned away, unable to bear the pity in his eyes. Grant was alive. He had to be. She couldn't accept any other possibility. The day passed in torturous uncertainty. Survivors from the ambush trickled back to town, each with the same story: chaos, gunfire from hidden positions, men falling. None had seen Grant after the initial attack. As dusk approached, Rosalie stood at the hotel window, scanning the street for any sign of riders. The second posse had returned an hour earlier with no news. They had found the site of the ambush, bodies of 2 outlaws, but no trace of Grant or Jasper Holt. "You should rest," Mrs. Henderson urged, joining her at the window. "You've been standing here for hours." "I can't," Rosalie replied, her voice hoarse from unshed tears. "He's out there somewhere. He could be hurt, needing help. Grant knows how to take care of himself," the older woman assured her, though worry lined her face as well. "He's survived worse situations." Rosalie was about to respond when movement at the edge of town caught her eye. A lone rider was approaching slowly, the figure slumped in the saddle. Even at this distance, she recognized Grant's black stallion. "It's him," she cried, already running for the door. She raced down the street, heart pounding, praying that the stillness of his form wasn't what she feared. As she drew closer, Grant raised his head and their eyes met. His face was bruised and bloodied, his clothes torn, but he was alive. "Rosalie," he murmured as she reached him. "You're a sight for sore eyes." "Grant," she grabbed the horse's reins, steadying the animal as Grant half fell from the saddle. She caught him as best she could, supporting his weight as he leaned heavily against her. "You're hurt." "Not as bad as it looks," he assured her, though his grimace belied his words. "Just tired. Very tired." People were running toward them now: the sheriff, Dr. Wilson, townspeople who had been watching for the return of missing men. They helped Grant to the doctor's office, Rosalie never leaving his side. While Dr. Wilson examined his wounds, a bullet grazed along his ribs, various cuts and bruises. Exhaustion from 2 days without rest, Grant kept his eyes on Rosalie, as if drawing strength from her presence. "Holt?" Sheriff Morgan asked when the doctor had finished binding Grant's wounds. "Dead." Grant's voice was flat. "He wouldn't surrender. His remaining men scattered. I don't think they'll trouble redemption again." Relief washed through the room. The sheriff clapped Grant on his uninjured shoulder. "You've done this town a great service, Prescott. Rest now. Details can wait till morning." When they were finally alone, Rosalie took Grant's hand, pressing it to her cheek. "I thought I'd lost you." "Never." He pulled her closer, his arms encircling her despite his injuries. "I made you a promise." She kissed him then, uncaring of who might see, pouring all her fear and relief and love into the connection. When they parted, Grant's eyes were bright with emotion. "I love you, Rosalie Shaw," he said simply. "These past days made me realize I don't want to waste another moment without telling you so." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too, so much it frightens me sometimes." He brushed away her tears with gentle fingers. "Don't be frightened, not anymore. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." 3 weeks later, as summer gave way to fall, Rosalie stood in the small church in Redemption, a bouquet of wildflowers in her hands. Mrs. Henderson had insisted on organizing the wedding, declaring that 2 orphans need someone to fuss over them on their special day. The church was filled with people Rosalie had come to know during her short time in town, hotel guests who had extended their stays to witness the ceremony, shopkeepers who had welcomed her, women who had befriended her. And standing at the altar, more handsome than she had ever seen him in his new suit, was Grant. His face lit up as she walked down the aisle on Sheriff Morgan's arm. The sheriff had offered to give her away, gruffly declaring that someone ought to do it properly. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Grant whispered as she reached him. The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion. They had written their own vows, simple declarations of love and commitment that brought tears to the eyes of many guests. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Grant pulled her into a kiss that promised a lifetime of passion and tenderness. The celebration afterward was held at the hotel, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. As they swayed together during a quiet moment, Grant held Rosalie close, his breath warm against her ear. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever imagined possible." She looked up at him, marveling that this remarkable man was now her husband. "When I ran from Silver Creek, I was only thinking of escape. I never dreamed I'd find a home and a love like this. I spent years drifting, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots." Grant's hand traced the curve of her cheek. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere but here with you." Later that night, as moonlight spilled through the window of their new home, a small but comfortable house on the edge of town that Grant had purchased with his reward money for bringing down Holtz, Rosalie rested her head on her husband's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Grant's fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Whatever we want. Sheriff Morgan's offered me that deputy position, says a growing town needs men who know how to keep the peace. And you'll accept?" "I think so." "It's steady work, safer than range detecting." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "And it means I'll be home every night with my wife." Rosalie smiled at the word. "Wife, I like the sound of that." "So do I, Mrs. Prescott." Grant's arms tightened around her. "I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness. After years of chasing outlaws, living with danger as my only companion, I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone to come home to. And I never imagined I could feel so free while being bound to someone." Rosalie raised herself on one elbow to look at him. "That's what you've given me, Grant, not captivity, but freedom to be who I truly am." His eyes darkened with emotion. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing this life, choosing me." "I already know I won't," she whispered, sealing her promise with a kiss. 1 year later, Rosalie stood on the porch of their home, watching as Grant rode up the path, returning from his duties as deputy sheriff. The sight of him still made her heart beat faster, even after months of marriage. Their life together had settled into a comfortable rhythm, Grant keeping the peace in a growing Redemption, Rosalie dividing her time between managing the hotel's accounts for Mrs. Henderson and creating a home she was proud of. Together, they had built a life neither had dared hope for in the days before they met. Grant dismounted, his face breaking into a smile as he spotted her. "There's my beautiful wife," he called, securing his horse before striding toward her. Rosalie moved to meet him, her hands resting instinctively on the small swell of her belly. They had discovered the pregnancy 2 months ago, their joy overwhelming as they planned for this new chapter in their lives. Grant embraced her carefully, his hand covering hers over their growing child. "How are my 2 favorite people today?" "We're well," she assured him, leading him into their home. "Your son has been quite active, or daughter," Grant reminded her with a grin. They had agreed not to make assumptions, though Rosalie secretly believed she carried a boy, a son with his father's green eyes and steadfast heart. As they sat down to dinner, Rosalie marveled at how far they had come from that fateful day when an outlaw had reached for her arm and a brave cowboy had intervened. What had begun in danger had blossomed into a love stronger than either could have imagined. "What are you thinking about?" Grant asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Just how fortunate we are," she replied, reaching across the table to take his hand. "How one moment can change everything." Grant's fingers interlaced with hers. "The moment I saw Holt threatening you, I knew my life would never be the same. I couldn't have known then how much better it would become. Do you ever regret it, settling down, leaving the excitement of your old life behind?" "Not for a second." His gaze was steady, filled with the love that had sustained them through good times and bad. "Every morning I wake up beside you is an adventure greater than any I've known, and now with our child coming." His voice caught with emotion. "I've never been happier, Rosalie, never more certain of where I belong." As twilight settled over redemption, Rosalie Prescott looked at the life she and Grant had built together, a life born from a chance encounter, nurtured by courage and commitment, and sustained by a love that had proven stronger than the dangers that had threatened to tear them apart. In this frontier town, they had found not just survival but true happiness, writing their own story in a land where second chances were rare and true love even rarer. For Rosalie, who had once fled in fear of a future not of her choosing, and Grant, who had wandered for years without a place to call home, their greatest adventure was just beginning, the shared journey of two hearts that had found in each other not only passion and purpose, but the profound peace that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be, with exactly the person you are meant to love.